Hello friends, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is all about my favorite books of 2022. I am filming this before the end of the year, so hopefully nothing creeps in the final few weeks of 2022 and we can just say that this is an exhaustive list, because if anything sneaks in and becomes a favorite, I will cry. So let's hope that doesn't happen. So this list that I'm going to give you today is a collection of the favorite books that I read in 2022, which I know you could have never guessed based on the title. Some are obviously my 5-star reads, but not all of them are. I tend to be a little critical when I'm giving my rating, I can admit it. So some of these are going to be a 4.5 or a 4-star even, but when I think back on 2022 and my reading and I look at my read shelf for this year, these are the books that I think are my favorites and the ones that I'm quickly recommending to my friends when they are looking for a book. With that said, here are my top books for the year in no particular order. First up, we have Stoneheart by Katie Robert. This is a prequel to Neon Gods and it follows Calypso and Medusa. Medusa works for Athena and in a sense does her bidding. And part of that bidding is she is supposed to kill or like get Calypso for Athena. What ends up happening is Calypso ends up seducing her assassin, Medusa. This novella packs a punch considering it's only 108 pages. It's steamy, it's enticing, and it's all around a great time. If you want to read this, it's free through February of 2023, so get your hands on it while you can. I believe you can get it from Katie Roberts' website, which I will try and remember to link below. I highly recommend getting on top of it if this is something you are interested in. It's a sapphic romance and it is everything I could have ever wanted from this little novella. Next up is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. This one absolutely took me by surprise. It follows our main character Alexis, who is a renowned doctor. She gets stranded in a small town after getting her car stuck in a ditch, and along comes Daniel to rescue her as her knight in shining armor. Alexis never plans to see him again until she stops at a bar in town on her way out. Daniel has this bet going with his friends and they bet that he can't pick her up. He goes up to her and is like, hey, I've got these stupid friends over there. They're trying to see if one of us can pick you up. Will you go along with it? And of course she agrees. And so he acts like he's leaving the bar with her. Alexis is a city girl and really doesn't see herself fitting into the small town lifestyle that Daniel has, especially since she's dealing with her abusive ex-husband back in her hometown. Before she knows it, Alexis finds herself slowly becoming more a part of this small town as Daniel becomes more a part of her life. I ate this shit up! This was an absolute swoon fest from beginning to end. I found myself getting stuck between the pages of Alexis and Daniel's romance, and I kept turning the page wanting more. In true Abby Jimenez fashion, the scenes in this are going to be closed door, fade to black sex scenes. Believe me, it leaves nothing to be desired in terms of the steaminess of the romance. It's hot, it's great, and you didn't need sex on the page to convey that, and it worked amazing for me. In my opinion, this book is a masterclass in developing a swoon-worthy romance while also dealing with hard topics and all around just having impeccable character development. This is a book I found myself recommending a lot to my friends this year, and hopefully I'm gonna get some of them on board. There's only one author who's actually made it twice on my favorite books list this year, and that is Emily Henry. First up, we have Book Lovers. This follows our literary agent main character, Nora. Nora's sister, Libby, begs her to get away from her work-filled life, and begrudgingly, Nora agrees, and they set off to Sunshine Falls, where they're going to have a little girl trip. In Sunshine Falls, Nora inevitably bumps into this editor named Charlie, who she knows back in the city, and they don't necessarily get along the best. And we get to see them in this little small town romance as their romance buds in the small confines of this city. But what really makes Emily Henry a great author in my eyes is her ability to incorporate a lot of harder topics into a romance. And for that reason, I find her books tend to gravitate more towards the realistic fiction side of things rather than the romance side of things. But this book dives deep into familial trauma and grief and loss, and all of this manifests with Nora's life and her relationships, particularly that of the relationship with her sister. So we get a good balance of family relationships as well as Nora's relationship with Charlie in this book, and it was just fantastic. There's a reason this won the Goodreads Choice Awards. I loved this one. I voted for this in the Goodreads Choice Awards and I have no complaints. Another Emily Henry that deals with more heavy topics while also being a romantic book is Happy Place. This one comes out in April of 2023. I was fortunate enough to be able to get my hands on an ARC and I ate this shit up in like a couple sittings, which is rare for me. This follows our main character Harriet, who is revisiting her friend's vacation spot with her friends for their annual get-together. Only this time, there's a little bit of a small problem. Harriet and Wynne have decided to end their engagement, and none of the friends that are going to be at this little vacation with them know it. So in order to have one last hurrah at this vacation house with all of their friends, they decide that they're going to fake having continued their engagement per se throughout this week, then kind of tell them at the end of the trip that their engagement has ended and let them have one last hurrah on this trip. So a little bit of fake dating ensues, and it's very clear from the jump that there's definitely some unresolved romantic tension between these two characters. We get so much of their history in this book, and if there's one thing about me, it's that I love friends to lovers romances and I love second chance romances, and this book fits the bill for both of those. You are dealing with a cast of 6 characters here, so it is a little large at times, but I think each character had their own perfect place in this book, and it was very clear how each character had their part in Harriet and Wynne's relationship, or in the friend dynamic as a whole. I cannot stop recommending this one to everyone, and I can't wait for y'all to get your hands on it. If you're not able to get an ARC before it comes out, I can't wait to hear everyone's reviews of it once it becomes published. It's gonna be great. If you haven't already pre-ordered this one and you really liked Book Lovers, I highly recommend getting this one, because this one was like above Book Lovers for me. My Emily Henry ranking is like Happy Place, Book Lovers, Beach Read, People We Meet on Vacation. If we're strictly talking about her adult romances, that's my ranking. So highly recommend picking this one up. One book that I thoroughly enjoyed that was not expected was Terms and Conditions by Lauren Asher. I read this for my Goodreads Choice Romance video, and I was like fully expecting to not like it, but clearly it made it on this list, so obviously I enjoyed it enough to consider it a favorite, and I did give it 5 stars. So this is the second book in the Dreamland Billionaires series. It follows the fine print in which we find out that these 3 brothers' grandfather has passed. And with his passing, he has given each of their brothers their own individual contingency in order to be able to receive their inheritance. Each book in the trilogy follows a different brother. This one follows Declan, and his contingency is that in order to become CEO, he must get married and have a child. Knowing this, his assistant Iris sets him up with like a buy a bride type scenario in which they meet right before the engagement announcement, and she actually like leaves him. She can't stand him. So in order to continue on with the plan, Iris steps up to the plate and announces that she's gonna be his new fiance. This fake engagement turns out to be something more as time goes on, as the line gets blurred between their fake relationship and the real romantic and sexual connection that they have with one another. 5 stars, loved this. I love getting to see these characters and see how their romantic relationship worked, as well as their workplace dynamic, which was really interesting. I've said this before, but sometimes fake dating can feel a little unrealistic to me, but this one actually made a lot of sense, because obviously Declan is going to go through with this in order to get his inheritance and to become CEO of this multi-billion-dollar company. All in all, this was fantastic. To kind of take a quick jump from the romances, 2022 was really my year of trying out mysteries and thrillers and getting to know a little bit more of my taste within the genre. With that comes a new favorite, and that is The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager. This follows our main character Emma, who is currently an artist, a painter in New York City. Back in her childhood, she went to a summer camp. While she was at the summer camp, she witnessed all 3 of her cabin mates leaving, and only one of them returned. Years later, she's offered to go back to the same exact camp, and she decides to go in order to kind of piece together what really happened, make sense of it in her mind, address the past, and maybe help solve the disappearance of these 2 girls. I don't really want to share more than that with you, because I went into this knowing basically nothing, and oh my god, this took me for an absolute ride, and I was obsessed. The plot twists in this were fantastic. I found myself turning every single page in hopes that I would get to the resolution quicker and find out more, and I was just blown away with how well this was done. I was 100% invested in this story. And I read a lot of Riley Sager in 2022. This one was easily my favorite. I did have a couple misses with Riley Sager, so it'll be interesting to follow more of his future releases and see kind of where he fits for me, because I've had like both ends of the spectrum in terms of his writing and his storytelling. But this one was phenomenal. I loved the cabin vibes. I loved the mystery of it all, and it was just so well done, and I cannot stop thinking about this book. Surprisingly, the next few books I'm going to talk about here are wintry / holiday reads. I had a lot of success in my holiday reads this year. The first one is called Season of Love by Helena Greer. This follows Miriam, our main character, who is returning to her hometown following the passing of her great aunt, who she was incredibly close to. This town that she's returning to, she's notoriously avoided and kind of left for years and hasn't seen anyone there for years because she fled the trauma that she faced there growing up. What do you know? Another romance that has trauma that I'm obsessed with. I don't know what this trend is, but I can't get enough, apparently. So her great aunt was a Jewish woman that ran a Christmas tree farm, which is obviously ironic for its own reasons. Nevertheless, upon Miriam's return, she is now confronted with her past traumas that she was fleeing from in this town, but she's now also got the grief of her great aunt that she has to deal with at the same time. In comes Noelle, who works on the Kerrigan Christmas tree farm. And Noelle isn't fond of Miriam being back in town again. So we kind of have rivals to lovers. I wouldn't really call them enemies, but they quickly grow on each other and their chemistry was spot on. I spent the entire book rooting for these two characters, both on their own as Miriam goes through the trauma and the pain that she's dealing with, but also them together and just kind of rooting for them to be successful. And it was great, and I can't stop recommending this. Then we have How to Excavate a Heart. This is a YA debut that features a Jewish main character, and it's like a holiday romance. Shawnee is our main character, who is in DC for an archaeological internship at a museum. And on their way into the city, Shawnee's mom literally hits a girl named May with her car. And by some stroke of luck or misfortune, however you choose to see it, Shawnee ends up dog sitting May's family dog. From here, a romance between them buds, and this kind of leaves Shawnee stuck between the internship that she's there for, this new relationship, as well as her family back home. And much like the books I mentioned previously, the romance in this was great, and I loved the character dynamic. As a little side note, it was very obvious that the author did their research on like whatever part of archaeological science, whatever, that Shawnee was studying, because it was fascinating to see all these little intricacies of science sprinkled throughout the novel. And it didn't take over the romantic plot, but it definitely like added a lot to Shawnee's character that I thoroughly enjoyed. Lastly, for the holiday books, I have A Very Merry Bromance. This is the 5th installment of the Bromance Book Club series, and it has been my favorite thus far. Following our main character Colton, he is a country music star, and Gretchen, who I believe is an heiress to like a whiskey company, isn't really involved in the company. This book delivered on all the holiday vibes I could hope for. If you've never read the Bromance Book Club series, in short, this whole premise follows this group of burly, typical dude type guys who read romance novels in order to figure out how to romantically or sexually satisfy their partners. Because what better way to know what a woman wants than read the romance novels that women write for women? And gender binary aside, this whole series never fails to deliver on a hot, fun, steamy romance, and this book was no exception. I highly recommend reading this whole series. It's probably my favorite romance series of all time. So if you haven't started it, highly recommend. And if you need to get to this book, highly recommend. But I do recommend reading them all. Like, read them in order. It's more fun that way. You get to know them all. And it's fun to see how each of them are introduced into this whole romance world. And by the time we get to the later books, you know a little bit more about each of the guys based on little tidbits that you've gotten throughout the series. So it's a whole blast. I recommend the whole series, but this one just really did it for me. Lastly, it's time to discuss my favorite book for the whole year. And that is Ophelia After All by Raquel Marie. This book swept me off my feet from page 1, and I'm so excited to tell you all about it. So this follows our main character, Ophelia, who is notoriously boy crazy, but she has to confront her personal identity and her sexual identity as she realizes that she finds one of the girls in her class attractive. In this book, Ophelia grapples with the fluidity of sexuality and growing up while also having a fantastic group of friends. This follows their senior year, kind of like right before prom and graduation. So the biggest moments of the senior's life, and she's also dealing with these major moments in her personal and romantic life in a way. And I say that this book is not a romance. It really is about self-discovery and sexuality and finding yourself. It's great. Clearly, I tabbed this a lot. The tabs are kind of transparent, so you can't really see them all, but like I picked them based on the covers. You can see kind of all of them there. I loved this book. There were so many quotes. Hold on. We'll find one. All of the dark pink are my favorite quote tabs, so let me just flip to one and find one for you. Oh, this is a great one. What happens when you tell the girls who trust and love you that you realize you sometimes look at them the way they expect boys to? Fantastic. Let's do another one. And you definitely don't owe it to anyone, least of all yourself, to hide the way you feel just because it would change things. Are you kidding me? I cannot recommend you pick this up enough. It is a fantastic story, and I wish I could tell you more sitting here in front of this camera. I wish I could fully convey my positive feelings about this book. It blew me out of the water, and I need you to go read it right now because it's fantastic, and Rocky is fantastic, and my favorite book of the year, friends. So that concludes this video. Those are my 10 favorite books that I read this year. A little bit more diverse taste. I'm really excited to see what happens in 2023 and how some things I've learned about my taste this year are challenged and implemented, and I can't wait to explore what comes in 2023. So thank you so much for watching. If you want to see the flip side to this coin, you can check out my worst books of 2022, where I basically just shit on books for a few minutes and tell you about all the books that I hated this year and why I hated them, and that's always a fun video. So the link is in the description if you want to watch that. But like I said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed, and I'll see you all in the next one. Happy reading!